without further ado, I'd like to introduce Emma Lysaght, who is an Emmy and BAFTA nominated Factual editor, and her credits include some really fantastic series, including Louis Theroux's Altered States, The Met, Kathy Burke's All Woman, and A Royal Team Talk. Matt Gray is an RTS nominated editor specialising in drama, and his credits include The Virtues, This Is England 90, The Stone Roses, The Dead Room, and his latest project, Factual drama, The Responsible Child, airs next month, so we shall look out for that. So I'd really like to start, and don't forget to ask your questions every time I give you a chance, with how it all began, because it's always interesting to know how editors got into the business in the first place, because it's one of the less known arts of our industry, I think. So Emma, first of all, you left school at 16.
I did. My father was a film editor in the old school days of film cutting room. So I grew up from a very young age watching Dad cut, and I just really wanted to do it. I was impatient to do it, and at the time I joined, film was going out, vid tape was coming in, then non-linear was on the horizon. So it's quite a male environment. It had been quite female. There'd been female in the cutting room, but I was very nervous, very shy, and I didn't get into a cutting room until I was 19. But at 19, I wasn't the most confident, and so my dad knew of one female editor. He didn't know her well, but he knew of her, and she'd come through the film industry, cutting film, and it was one of those lucky breaks, a hard but lucky break, right place, right time. She needed an assistant, and I stepped in and became her assistant, and that went very well. Within the first few months, I was cutting news for Channel 4, which was good, but very high pressurised.
Yes, what's the benefit of cutting news as a sort of learning curve, if you like?
It makes you editorially hose it right down, because it's the pressure is high, but it's not to dismiss it, but it's almost a simpler way of storytelling, because you know exactly what you've got to do within those 3 minutes. There's no nuance, there's honesty, there's always honesty, but you have to tell it very clearly to the audience in a very tight time frame, whereas in documentary it's far more layered and far more complex, and so that's kind of how I got started.
So you were really a trainee, so you'd messed around with your father's sort of, it sounds like just literally the trims that he left behind, turning them into your own films.
Had my first screening at 13 with Gunshot Wounds from the Head and Sea of Faith, so it's cows in a field and operating theatres. It was eclectic, but that's how I started. And
then 2 years you were working with just learning the craft.
Yeah,
I was
assisting in online suites. I was cutting in online suites. I was cutting news. I was cutting corporates, it was looking back at 19, 20. I was lucky, but I have a son who's 13. Would I want Max to put under that pressure? Maybe not. It was high pressured, and I think that looking back, though I'm very lucky with where I've got to, I think taking time out and studying and being amongst others, and learning your skill and learning where you want to be rather than having to deliver straight off to somebody might be better, but I don't know. I didn't take that route.
But you decided to put even more pressure on yourself at 21 by going freelance.
Yeah, my first freelance gig was my 21st birthday, so I was the sad person not going down the pub. I was the sad person in an online suite, doing my first freelance gig, and then I've then assisted. I think I cut my first doc at the age of 23-ish, I think, and it has been hard work, but it's also, I've been incredibly lucky. There's a lot of people that trusted me at a young age with their films and to work on their films, and I'm immensely grateful to those people.
And you did have contacts, but it does absolutely demonstrate that you don't have to go through a full academic sort of experience if you want to become an editor.
Yeah. I mean, because also the other thing is that on the whole, you learn as you go along, and it's how can I put it? It's a creative thing. It's not yes, I have to be able to read and write and all those things, but it comes from your heart. What you're doing is you're expressing yourself. So, don't get me wrong, Matt's studied and knows the philosophy and and all of those amazing things. But I suppose I've done it a different one. So mine comes from my gut, I suppose. So if you're not academically, if it doesn't do it for you academically, it may be a harder way in. But you can still get in because you're telling stories. We're telling stories.
Yeah, and Matt, you did, by contrast, go a very different route because you did do philosophy of film, didn't you, at university?
That's right. Well, I did a philosophy degree in Leeds initially, and then because I sort of knew I wanted to work in film and TV, but didn't know anyone at all, and didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do.
So you had no contacts?
No contacts whatsoever, no. So I did a sort of fairly general kind of thing to give myself time to sort of think and work out what I wanted to do. And then I found that didn't get me very far, so I went back and did a film course for a while.
And did that help?
Yeah, massively. It was quite a vocational course in Leeds, and that got me thinking very much about how you can get into the industry. It sort of opened a few doors and sort of pointed me in the right direction.
Well, yes, because you actually, the open door for you was Yorkshire Television, which
That's
at the
right.
time
Well, initially I
had
worked as a runner.
opportunities.
The first job I had was a runner on My Summer of Love, the Pavlikovsky film, which was great. But then I did a couple of jobs in the camera department and sort of tried a few different things out. And then eventually, I got to Yorkshire TV, which was great because I sort of was there for a couple of weeks, and then straight away they put me into an assistant role and sort of.
And did you
got
feel you
straight in there.
found your thing when you got there?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, and I was very lucky actually because a lot of facilities, I think you have to work as a runner and then work your way up. Whereas there, they sort of just chucked me right in, and I just had loads of time to edit material, and and it was great, really good learning experience.
Yeah, and what was the biggest break for you? I suppose it was when you actually started working first with Shane Meadows, was it?
Yeah, it's probably. I mean, I worked at Yorkshire TV for 2 or 3 years, and then went freelance. And just then, a tutor who I'd been working with got a job as a producer at Warp, and so she got me into Warp, and I did a couple of jobs with them.
So Warp Films, just tell the audience about Warp Films just a little bit, so because they're a really unusual company.
Yeah, they're a Sheffield-based, well, Sheffield and London-based, but I think they started in Sheffield, production company. A sort of spin-off from the record label, Warp Records. But they do great, brilliant independent films. They've done sort of most of Shane's recent films and tons of other really great films.
So for anybody who doesn't know
film.
Shane Meadows, the director, he did all the, This Is England, probably quite well known to most of you, and a very unusual style of working. In fact, I think it'd be a good idea to go to clip 1 now, because we can look, this was your first credit actually as an editor,
That's
having
right.
worked as an assistant with Shane Meadows.
I assisted on This Is England 86 and got bumped up to junior editor on that, and then following that, did the Stone Roses film, Made of Stone.
Yeah, that was
solo.
actually a 35mm film, wasn't it?
No, it was digital.
Was it?
It was shot on pretty much every digital format you can imagine.
Was it?
I think it was about 35 cameras or something for the concert scenes in it. So it was an interesting, interesting one to edit that.
So certainly a big learning curve to help you move from assistant editor to editor.
Exactly. We had a huge amount of material to work with there. So.
Okay, well, let's look at the first clip, which is This Is England 90. And just for a bit of background, the year is 1990. The rave scene has just entered England. The sound of the Stone Roses lurks towards Sean and the gang. This means that Woody and Lol are living in a domestic bliss. They're happy again. But this year will see huge changes in everyone. This is the year 1990. This is England.
I don't want to be funny or anything, but are you sure we're going the right way? Because this looks a bit familiar, guys.
Yeah, no, we're on the right path.
Yeah, that drywall is a bit familiar, guys.
We're right. No, we're definitely up and down here.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's looking good.
Look,
Please do,
A to Z.
Couldn't have got a pocket one.
Try that fatty one.
Couldn't get a pocket.
I couldn't get a pocket one. No, I'm sorry about that.
Are you serious?
What? I need to read
That's
it.
going to cause damage.
I need
Honestly,
to match the map with the road.
I know, mate, you don't have to put it up on the fucking windscreen, do you? You're a fucking liability, mate.
Do you not even know how to read a map, Gadge? Listen, I know how to read a map, mate. Right? That's all you need to know.
Well, fucking read it then.
I'm reading it. Right.
Well, right here.
No. We're this green line here. And when we get down to this little yellow line, we go left, right?
Right, you ready, Mel?
Yeah. Don't lick it.
Gotta lick it. Gotta lick it to stick it on.
With your finger.
Just gonna get that perfectly between them eyebrows. Let's get it right there. That's the
Right.
mother. Right there, there's the pal. Right, ask us some questions.
It's so you.
Am I male?
Yes,
you are.
Yeah, definitely.
Am I famous?
No.
Well, I don't know.
In the area, amongst certain females, probably famous.
Am I fat?
From what I've seen,
Yeah.
pale and tired.
Am I penis?
You are a penis, but it's in a certain place.
So close. Quite close to where it is now.
You like dickheads.
Go on.
Am I female?
Yes.
Yes. Oh, she's a powerful woman.
Well,
Am I famous?
yes, but for all the wrong reasons.
Do you know who she is? No.
Maybe not ask the kids.
Oh, okay. Am I Margaret Thatcher?
No.
Oh, boo! Thank fuck for that. Am I
You're worse
old?
than Thatcher.
Worse than
Yes,
Thatcher?
definitely.
Shit the bed.
Does it go on that?
Am I old then?
No.
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 Old.
I'll give you a clue.
Oh, we're giving it.
I call you it all the time.
Oh, Myra Hindley. Shit bag. Fuck
Guys, we've fucking been past We're not! I'm telling you now, we've been past that fucking farm about 4 times. There's a place here called Cockend, and I'd know if we've been... You're a Cockend? Mate, if we've been past Cockend, I'd know about it, wouldn't I?
I swear to God, that milestone, we passed it, Gary.
We've not!
Yes,
That
we
what?
fucking have,
That
mate.
what?
We really
Milestone?
that mile sign, that mile thing, that milestone, passed it. It's the 3rd time passing it, boss.
Daddy, you've not been watching the fucking road.
I swear to God, mate.
I can't watch the road and read the map.
One thing, man, I asked you for one thing, you don't do fuck all right here.
You watch the road and I watch
I am
the
watching
map.
the road, mate.
And we have to work as a team. And look, the fucking map's got holes in it, you can look through.
Good map then.
Well, it was the best we could
Well
do.
done, Gary. You're not even the map
I
around
swear
here,
to
is
God,
it?
mate, you're ruining our fucking lives at the moment. You have no fucking idea, do you? You have no idea.
That's great. That's really entertaining. So, first of all, do we have any questions on what you've seen so far or anything about early career? Any questions before we move on? Yes, there's one question here. If you could just wait for the microphone. Thank you.
Hi, I was just wanting to know what was it like working with Shane Meadows for This Is England? Because I actually studied the film in college, and we studied him as a director. And I was just wondering what it was like working with him and the experience.
Well, that's exactly what we're going to ask next. So we're about to find out. That's a good point to ask the question. Yeah, he works very unusually, doesn't he?
Yeah, I mean, it's a real privilege to work with him. He's sort of an incredibly creative director, and it always starts with a script. So you have a scripted sort of, the script outline at least anyway, and then each scene, he tends to try and shoot chronologically so that this sort of things you can discover things as we go along. So during the shoot, I'll sort of cut stuff alongside the shoot and then send things to him as quickly as possible, and he'll sort of watch them. And I think sometimes that kind of feeds back into what's going on there as well. And
So he's very influenced in a way by what's going on.
so.
in the
I think he's
edit.
got a very good idea of what he's looking for, but I think, yeah, sometimes things come up that kind of can guide that to some extent.
So why did you choose that clip? There's a lot of improvising in that.
Yeah, I mean, I chose that clip. It's quite hard to pick small clips from this stuff because there's sort of, I think the films and the editing in them has a sort of cumulative effect throughout, and it sort of builds to, they then get to well, it's not they miss, they don't find the rave at all, actually. They go to a fairly rubbish party, but it's sort of, that sort of shows that there's two very different shooting styles in there, I think. So there's this sort of fixed rig on the car, which is sort of all locked off cameras, and then there's the single camera barbecue scene, which is kind of just following stuff around and reacting to what's going on there. But the big thing, I think, for editing, the things very difficult is getting the structure right and getting the pacing of that structure right. And I think this contrasts the script, the Virtues clip that's coming up later, because you have sort of different parts of the gangs that are having different stories, things going on at the same time, and so you're sort of balancing the 2 or 3 strands of story at one time.
A bit like real life, really.
Exactly, yeah, exactly.
That's why it feels so real, I suppose.
And it's sort of getting the pacing right, sort of
Yeah.
between those stories is the key, I think.
So that's a really interesting learning curve in terms of improvisation, working with improvised stuff and working with unusual directors. Emma, I just want to sort of gallop on momentarily to you now and think about, you had a great diversity of projects. You like working on lots of different kinds of projects, don't you? And that's, again, helpful for the learning process.
Yes, exactly. I mean, part of it, I've cut news, I've cut current affairs, dispatches, time watches. When I came in and I was cutting what you'd call very structured, like the presenter-led historical documentary. I've done the commute, the whole gamut, I suppose. And the reason I like doing a variety of work is that I think it challenges you, and it may not all be supposedly high profile or anything like that, but I like the directors I work with. We have a damn good laugh. I do the best I can by every job I do. So whatever job it is, be it Louis, be it the Jubilee, be it a garden series, being it news, when I walk in that edit suite, I will do the best job I can.
And you will do the job as, in terms of, it's the director's voice you're looking for, not your voice.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's the truth of the matter, is that there'll be certain things in the way I cut. People have said that you can see me a little bit in them, but I shouldn't be in the forefront. The nicest thing that happens is when your director says, do you know what, I can see me, or you surprise them in a moment. They've been filming for a year or 6 months, and suddenly a scene that they can't remember, just because there's been so much going on, or until you lay it out on a long assembly, that little moment that doesn't mean anything will actually stand up and go, actually, I really need that. It's just an expression or a line, but I really need that at this point to be able to push the story forward. But for me, it's really important that it's their film. It's our film together. Don't get me wrong, but it is their film. That's the nicest thing when a director calls you and says, "Will you make my film for me?" That's a huge compliment, because they get to make 1-2 films a year, and they're asking you to cut that for them, and that's.
And only by viewing the content really meticulously do you find those little moments, which will be surprising.
I watch everything. I watch and hand log everything, and I do some directors can get a bit freaked out. I do very long assemblies, like the first pull of Louis. They've been filming, I think, forgive me, Aaron, if I'm wrong, on and off. They've been filming because they were parallel filming 2 films in the States while they shot Death. I call it Death. Sorry, Choosing Death. So they had a lot of material, and the first assembly we sent Louis was over 3 hours long, and he was up for seeing it. So now some people, that would scare them, not scare them, but they get overfaced by it, because it is this whirling beast. But for me, I can't cut tight, because until I lay it all out, I worry that I'm imposing an editorial on something until I know the 360, and I think you get a richer film, for me, if you don't try and impose on yourself, if you read the moments and layer them up that way, you get a fuller film. I don't know.
That's really interesting, actually, because I work in a very similar way to that. I leave things really long, and then I find sort of taking time away is much easier than expending time. Yeah.
So we're going to show a clip of Louis Theroux in a minute and talk a bit about working with him. Any more questions before we move on? I think we all want to see the Louis Theroux clip, although it's not an easy watch, is it? It's not an easy watch. So just by way of introducing it, Louis Theroux spends time with those preparing to take a lethal but legally prescribed overdose, and meets a controversial group educating others in how to end their lives. So it's a tough watch, but if we can have a look at the clip, please.
So what's informing this decision that you've taken?
How we die impacts the people we leave behind for the rest of their lives. I mean, my husband has to work, my kid has to go to school. Why would I want to force them to watch me become so broken? I mean, I'm sure that it's already been traumatic enough for them.
Have they had input into the decision?
They just support whatever I want. We've got the snake out. That's Frindle.
Yeah. Frindle. Where's he gone?
He's going up.
Something feels like he's nibbling me. Can Frindle kill a rat?
Oh, easily. If he got your hand and then constricted it, he could kill your hand. Which is like cutting off blood circulation.
Why are you only telling me this now?
Because this is when you asked me.
Do you know much about why we're doing our documentary?
I do know a little bit, but not much.
What do you understand it to be about?
About how it's like living with an illness.
Your mum's illness?
Yeah.
Are you okay talking about it?
Yeah.
And how much do you know about your mum's illness?
A lot more than I could explain.
And you understand it to be life-threatening, is that correct?
I tell them whatever I have just learned. But I mean, it's been the same story for years now. It's like, well, I could be dead in a couple months, But we still get along really good. And he knows I love him like crazy.
Does Braden know about the aid in dying?
Oh, he's heard about the California End of Life Options Act. He's heard me explain it to a lot of people. Like, why would someone do that? what is,
They're in so much pain, they'd rather be dead.
But they're going to die anyway, right?
Yeah.
Because I don't want to die. I'm trying to make the last bit less bad. And that's all.
What are you actually drawing? He's doing a picture of the boom pole.
Yes, he is.
That's very good.
Yeah.
He is documenting the documentary makers.
Yeah. the thingamajig.
It's such a rich scene. It's hard to know where to start, but you're doing so many different things there, aren't you? Because you know the focus on the boy changes really.
Yeah, it's. I suppose it's hard actually. We were talking about reception. It's hard to explain why you do what you do because we just naturally just do it, don't we? We just react. But it was trying to. Because the thing is, it's a film about people choosing to end their lives, and that is a sad subject matter. But within those moments, within any moment, there is always a beat of lightness. It's not always a monotone darkness in those rushes. And there is lightness there, and there is love and lightness there. And so what it was trying to do was place Braden, who is in the centre of this, her two children, but Braden is in the centre of what's going on, that he's living it. They've been living it for 3 years. And also to kind of put a spotlight on him so that in a way, he becomes all family members because the other character had daughters and a grandchild, but also that you understand the dilemma she's going through. I'm not explaining it very clearly, but it was just to try to layer up the complexity of the choices that all of the characters were making and the difficulty of that.
And also the scene with the snake, I think, is really interesting because it raises big questions about how you cover edits, but you actually have to tell. You're not just covering edits. You're making a sort of supplementary story that adds to it.
Yeah. I mean, that's actually that little scene there is it's kind of 3 small scenes, and it was in a really tight environment. So cutaways and how it's cut. Bless him, Wes was shooting it, and it was. I think that was the first day of filming for Wes. He shot that scene in a hospital scene, and then Aaron shot the rest of it. So it was to cut it was quite hard. Hence, you've got a jump cut in there, and there are different reasons why there's certain bits of sync that have stayed. It was also to allow the audience to, because we've got a son that's my age in a room with his mother talking about dying, and it was also to inform the audience so that you feel comfortable that actually Braden's fully on board with this, because it's quite uncomfortable some of those conversations that were taking place in front of that child, and so that's why. I suppose they was trying to explain. Sorry, I'm not.
No, you're explaining it extremely well, actually. And just tell us a little bit about working with Louis.
It was actually when I first Skyped him, I was terrified because they were still in the States filming, and I started going through the rushes. And then when Louis Theroux, I think, bless him if I'm wrong, sorry, Louis. I think he asked me along the lines of, what do you think the film's about? And I'm like, you're Louis Theroux. What I said was what I truly thought, which is actually the film is about a big choice, but it's about the strength of humanity, and it's about love. There was so much love that came through the rushes, just oozed through the rushes from both Gus's family and from Laurie's family. So I sat there saying, I think it's about humanity and love. And, in the edit process, he's amazing. I didn't know how controlling he would be. It's a Louis Theroux film, but he's incredibly open. He is a lovely guy. We got the BBC cut down to 62 minutes, just over, and he said to me, come on, Em, I don't think he calls me Em, come on, Emma, we can get it down, get it down, it'll never go around the world at that length, get 2.5 minutes out. And I had to sit there with my mouth wobbling like it is now, saying, Louis, I can't get 2.5 minutes out for you. I've made the best film I can for you. At this length, if you want to get the time out, then well, I don't know, I can't do it. And I was a bit nervous saying it to him, and he was fine with it. And then Aaron and I had to come back and recut the international version, and we had to get the 2.5 minutes out. And we both walked in going, okay, come on then, maybe we were just being a bit indulgent and precious. And we fought, and the moments that came out were beats. They weren't editorial moments, but they were the human elements that just layered the film. Those are the beats, the little ones that aren't on the nose, but just you and I, they're aside. They're like the ketchup on your chips. You can still see the chips, but you just need them to nuance a film. So anyway, that's the story. But yeah, Louis is brilliant. He's really, really
That's
good.
really good to know, isn't it? And does anybody have any experiences of having to struggle to get those last couple of minutes out of a film? I mean, that sounds quite familiar, I think. Any questions before we move on that subject? Yes, just here. 2 questions, one there. And then if you can pass the mic... put the microphone there ready. Thank you.
Hi, Emma. In the last 20 years, there's kind of been a noticeable shift in Louis' journalistic style.
Mm-hmm.
How conscientious are you of that when you go to edit something that he's given you?
I don't think I was. I just reacted to the rushes, like I always do, I suppose. And I reacted to, the rushes and the man I met. So he, I suppose that's the best answer I can give you. Sorry, I didn't take that on board. I just treated it as a one-off film, which is what it was. Absolutely, it's Louis' film. But that's why.
So whatever it is, you are just there. You
at that
described
time,
it
it's part of a series, but I'm making it's a one-off film that stands in its own right. And Louis' take on it, and Louis' behaviour, not behaviour, but his take on it is within the rushes. You can see them; it's all there.
And you've described it as like opening a Christmas presents every film.
Oh yeah, it's just amazing. That's why you want to edit. It's like if we had the same rushes, you and I, we'd cut them differently. Because we all cut differently, but every time you start a film, I always think of it as like it's Christmas. Sometimes you'll get socks, and you don't want socks because you've got to try and make them into tights. But sometimes, my God, you get a car,
Dior dress.
Yeah, and you're literally just. I mean, the most wonderful thing is when the rushes react to you, and it's almost organic, and it's just so free flowing. And Louis felt a really good fit for me on that. It felt very organic for me to make that film. And when I cut with Claire Richards, another director, her rushes, there's something about them that I feel it feels very natural to react to her rushes.
Fantastic. Yes, okay, so quick second question, please.
How difficult of a film was it to edit, like, not in terms of technical, but the emotion behind it?
It was for 2 reasons. One, obviously, Gus, bless him, so a man dies on camera, and another lady, Deborah, we meet, and then the next time we meet, she's no longer here. Laurie is no longer here. It is very, very hard. And also the other pressure, so it's emotionally hard. You do cry. They were filming in the States when I cried, and then I didn't cry. You don't get numb to it, but you look at the rushes in a different way. And then at different stages, I would cry again, which sounds indulgent of me, but you just do. But also it was the pressure of the fact that these people had done something very brave, because, not everybody's going to like what they've done. Both their families and themselves have done something very brave, and you don't want to let them down. I don't want to get it wrong. You know what I mean? They're not going to be here to see it, and so you want to do right by anybody, don't you? So it was the pressure of hopefully getting it right.
And I think that's really interesting, because there is, Matt, high emotion in the dramas that you cut as well, and it must be quite emotionally draining. We're going to see a clip from The Virtues next, and that's a quite emotionally harrowing piece, isn't it?
And it's interesting hearing that, actually, because it's a very similar experience working with Shane. The rushes are just so good, and you're never sure you're going to be laughing or crying or what the response is going to be, but you always have to respond to what comes in, and it's quite a sort of organic process, I suppose. It's not a great word to use, but
Do you go home some nights and sort of feel the world's closing in on you? I mean, because The Virtues, I find, it's a really hard watch, isn't it?
Yes, and I mean, some of it is, I suppose. There's more so. I mean, This Is England had more sort of light and shade, I suppose. But I think in The Virtues, there's still a lot of humanity there, and a lot of comedy, in places as well.
And
the families that come into that too are brilliant.
Yes, but it was, bits were quite autobiographical of
I think there's an element to that. Yes, there's definitely. Yeah.
So it was almost like you're looking into his soul. It's a sort of personal story.
I think so. I mean, I think his work is often quite personal. So yeah, and again, it's a similar principle. You want to. I mean, he's very much an auteur, so you're sort of making his film, but it's sort of trying to be sensitive to the material and sort of see if you can take it places where perhaps you didn't expect it would go, or and find new things in it.
Well, let's take a quick look at the clip that you've chosen for particular reasons. So this is Channel 4 2019. Joseph falls into despair when his young son leaves for Australia with his ex. With no immediate family to live for, Joseph is haunted by a past he has tried for decades to forget.
Can anyone sing? Can any of you lot sing? No. No. I bet you can sing.
I can.
Can you?
Yes.
Come on then. Can you sing? Come on then, try to sing.
Yes, you can.
All right, try this. Let's have it nice. Come on.
Come on, go. You've been on my mind, and I grow fonder every day. Lose myself in I dare you to let me be you one and only. Promise I'm worth it to hold in your arms. So come on and give me a chance until the end starts. Bye.
Yeah, I need to go for that one there. Yeah, love. It's the job there, it's the job with the medicine. You lads, sing on them, help yourself. Sophie vodka? Yeah, defo, yeah, no problem, yeah. Vodka! Okay, now what we do now? That's horrible! Okay, now!
Don't want to keep on going on about this money for the bill. You owe a lot of drinks now, you keep on ordering without paying.
No, I've got it though.
Yeah, I know, but I don't know you, mate. You come into my pub and everyone's having a great night.
Yeah.
You're coming in here and you're rebelling everyone up. And then, I don't know who's man, and you could bolt out. That's all I'm saying, mate. That's all. No, you can see where I'm coming from. I'm running a business, all right? You just come here out of the blue. Yeah? All right? You don't want to be the dickhead, all right?
Yeah, I'll settle
me
up. Let me have a piece and I'll settle up. I'll settle up. Fucking hell.
It's a winner. We'll call it one. You had a good night here.
Yeah, what's the 100 quid though, was it?
Mate, you've had shot after shot.
I'm okay, I've got yeah, it's fucking 20 quid there as well, Fred.
Alright, mate,
I'm getting a bit out of order though, aren't you? Lads, have I been out of order tonight? Yeah. Have I been out of order? Please make me look a twat there, Frank. Come on, Don't wait. See you later, mate.
It's just terrifyingly realistic. I think that's what's really so striking.
Yes, yeah. It's, I think it captures that horrible kind of queasiness of a night like that.
Sort of more real than real.
Yeah, exactly. And after this, I mean, it's a really difficult scene or a show to cut small sections out of because it's very much a cumulative thing with that. You start off with him having just said goodbye to his kid, and then he sort of sat there. There's much longer shots at the beginning of the scene, so he sort of sat there on his own in the bar, and then he kind of starts moving around and trying to talk to people just to sort of escape his own sort of thoughts, I suppose. And then it kind of gets more cutty and more sort of the pace builds as he kind of becomes more pissed. But yeah, definitely captures that
And the music
feeling.
is a very important part of that scene. There's a sort of sense of foreboding in a way in music.
Yes, exactly. Music's such an important thing in Shane, well, in editing in general, but I think in Shane's work in particular.
Yeah, and we're going to look at a clip of something different that you've done in a minute. But is your sort of natural affinity with this more improvised style, would you say, or are you open to?
I'm open to everything, similarly, same as you said. I mean, I think the interesting thing about editing is that you do get to try all sorts of different projects, and I know I really love working with Shane on his stuff, but then working on more tightly scripted things is also really interesting. And docs, I've done a couple of docs; they're also interesting. So it's,
what does he actually tell you he wants? When you start off, does he give you clear instructions?
No, we don't really talk about it beforehand. I mean, I'll just get the rushes in and sort of just put them together how I sort of feel they should go. I mean, because it's improvised material, quite often there'll be, say there's sort of 5 takes, there'll be a section of 1 take that's an absolute sort of standout moment, and then quite often you'll kind of structure the rest of the scene around that. You'll try and build something from that, really sort of key moment.
And have there been surprising scenes that you've ended up using in different ways? Or,
always, yeah. I mean, the first pass, and once you've assembled it, then the first pass is finding the structure, so then you really can throw it around. I mean, particularly with This Is England, because there's so many different strands to the story, you really sort of find interesting things in the structure. And if you get something, what's interesting is if you get something slightly wrong at the sort of first sort of quarter, it can completely knacker the rest of the film. So it's, all the way through, you have to really sort of keep an eye on that. And,
high concentration.
And keep the audience sort of engaged. It's
absolutely. So any questions about drama editing here at this point? Anybody madly keen on the form, knowing more? Okay, we'll move on because we've got 3 more clips to look at, and I'm sure plenty more questions to ask. So I wanted to move on to your Kathy Burke All Woman series because that was something that you didn't join from the start. So tell us the story of how you got into doing that.
I got a phone call from Lucy, one of the directors, saying would I be willing to come in and help out on the Kathy series. It had been through numerous weeks in the edit suite, and I believed in the subject matter. I'm 20 odd years, and not wishing to go on about it, but 20 odd years in the industry, and 3 hours about women on TV. I just thought, rock on, really. So I believed in it, and I love Kathy, and I love her honesty. But it's very easy to walk. So I saw a link of one of the cuts, and it's very easy to stand outside and see the wood for the trees, because you're an open eye to it. And also I came in with a brief of, if this goes wrong, we had a week to get a programme in front of the channel who weren't too happy. So I just said, if this goes wrong, let's not worry about egos here, I'll just leave the room because I'm not the fit you need. So let's not just keep doing the wrong thing, find somebody else. But it was a case of just they'd done the main interviews with Kathy but hadn't placed them in yet. And actually that's the main thing, you have Kathy Burke. And so to not place Kathy and her attitude and her sass within the films, they didn't feel that unusual, I suppose. They didn't feel very Kathy, didn't feel very different. And so I just, looking back, I mean, that's the thing, it's quite easy to do. That's what I mean, it's easy to have come in and do that, and then it work. But I think when you're in the midst of something sometimes, and it's not working for you, for whatever reason, it can be a bit, it can kind of overcome you, I suppose, and I think that's possibly where they were.
So is there a lesson there about, sometimes if you're sort of blocked in the way something's looking, just being prepared to just let somebody else
Oh my God, no, the number of times you come in at, I don't know if you're the same, come in at 9 a.m. and nothing lands until about 5:30. And it's all the same rushes and just nothing is landing, nothing is feeling.
Funny that, isn't it?
Oh
Sometimes
my God.
Suddenly it all falls into
place. At 5:30 it happens, you're like, right, I'm here till 10. Or 11 or 12 because I've got a deadline, and there's no rhyme or reason, and you come in the following day and it flows. If I hit a point and I've got the time, on Kathy I didn't, I had to deliver every single day because in 10 weeks we cut 3 programmes. You normally have 7, 8, 9 weeks to cut a single programme, so it's very tight to get them through. So I didn't really have that, I can leave that to the side. But if something's not working, if you're fighting a scene and it's not landing, move on. Because as you move further down, something may happen. You may just be processing that in your back of your head, and you'll be moving on, still making the edit run, which is what our job is to do, make that edit run, keep to a deadline, keep the edit going, isn't it? And then you'll come back to it, and it's freed up. You haven't torn yourself in knots about it.
There's always
you know
sort of 3 scenes I find that are absolute nightmares, and you end up sort of, you go away and come back, and eventually you find it, but it's always there. It's just sort of
sometimes the exec can really help in that process as well, don't you think? That the exec.
Yes, I mean, notes are often
fresh eye, really.
Incredibly useful, exactly, and it's always important to engage with that, because they can really sort of push you in the right direction, I think.
Well, as they say, you can only see it for the first time once.
That's it.
And then you're too close. Let's have a look at the Kathy clip, which is from All Woman, and Kathy Burke's take on what it is to be a woman in a way. 3 episodes, if we can take a look at that, please.
What's the worst thing anyone's ever said to you about the way that you look?
Do you know what? I was more upset if people called me stupid than if people called me ugly. I don't know whether it's just you grow such a thick skin when you're told since you were a kid you're not a pretty girl. Do you know what I mean? And I was told it constantly. I was asked by production, can we find some old photographs of you to show you beautiful viewers? I see a little fatty when I was about 2. I think I look more like my 2-year-old self now because I was such a little chubster. If I could say one thing to this young 13-year-old Kath, I'd say, you look absolutely gorgeous. You've got the most beautiful skin. You've got amazing eyes. Please stop giving yourself a hard time. But unfortunately, I did, because I just think you naturally do at that age. 2 things really changed my life. One, Anna Share Theatre. The other thing was punk rock. That to me was like, at last, I can be the girl I want to be. I want to have short hair. I want to be able to wear monkey boots. Now I was part of a uniform that people sort of understood. A relief. You know, everybody loved Debbie Harry. And even though she was punk, she was sort of a mix of really glam, but really grungy as well. And I did really love polystyrene.
Some people think little girls should be seen and not heard, but I think, oh, bondage, up yours! 1, 2, 3, 4!
I just idolised them because they were shouting and swearing and...
Wow, she's sick and she's bad. She sings and she raps, she shit and she's whack.
From punk to the Spice Girls, music has offered an alternative image for women. I want to meet one of the rebels of today, 25-year-old Nadia Rose. I've listened to some of her music, yeah. I think my neighbours probably thought I got myself a new young lover because of the bass and banging through the walls.
Yeah, up in that squad. Fucking with my squad? I think not. Me and my bitches, we roll deep and we always got green, so we pretty much peas in a pod.
She's so great.
She's amazing. Nadia Rose is just...
incredible. So presenter-led programmes are another challenge all of their own, aren't they?
Yeah, exactly. They are, in the sense that they are more... you have to definitely make that. I mean, the Kathy one was different because it's a kind of a crossover. What I found when I was putting it together was it felt almost like a biography of Kathy herself, because she shared things of herself, but she is also presenting a programme. So it's getting that balance right and keeping on board. We were very lucky that Kathy was very open. I mean, when she came into the classroom, she was very kind of easy to be around. But yeah, they are different.
And she was, she wasn't just fronting it, she was very embedded in some of the sequences, wasn't she? Going to the hospital, watching the birth, all those
exactly. And the other thing is obviously coming on so late to it, you can't inform, like all the main interviews have been done. So normally during an edit, or sometimes during an edit, they will film it, and then by the time you do what I call the main interviews, which are sit-down interviews, you'll have an idea of what the structure of the film is, so you know the beats you want. They were already in the can, so we couldn't ask for any more, so you had to work with what you had. So that was limiting in a way, but it just makes you work harder, I suppose.
But would a lesson from that be that if you're working with a presenter, you've got to bolt the presenter's bits in first and build everything else around it? Or would that be too rigid a rule?
I suppose actually for me, even if I'd approached Kathy, I would always go to the actuality, because I always try to make the actuality work the hardest it can. So some people write commentary and then make the actuality work. I will always try and rinse the actuality and get everything I can out of the actuality, and then whatever else I add embellishes that, so it fills a hole that the actuality can't fill because it's just not there. So I suppose I wouldn't rely on the main interview to feel what the actuality is, I suppose, for me personally. But that's maybe just because...
Yes, different people have different styles.
Yeah, exactly.
So are there some questions there? There's quite a lot to think about there in terms of how you edit Factual and work with presenters. A question here, thank you.
Hiya, I was just thinking, when you said you started out, you were like one of the only women in editing. Has that changed since you started, especially with series like what we just saw?
Well, Kathy was all women. It's the first series I've worked on. It was an all-women crew, which was great. There were some female editors around, but I suppose I was just so bolted into the edit suite that I didn't really know that many. So there are a few of my generation. There are fewer that have children, I believe, because I've got a son, and to be my husband's also an editor, but to be a working editor who works in docs and we all work stupid hours. I'm sure you've all burnt the midnight oil making your films. You know, you get in it, you love it. It's not about the bottom line, it's about making a film. So mums are rarer, but thankfully there's a scheme that was set up by The Garden, who are phenomenal, that brings on young assistant editors. They do A&E, they do they do the big hitters, and through that there are some female editors coming up. But it's difficult to balance. It is changing, though. I would definitely say it's changing, But it was quite funny. I've just been in a facility house cutting with a female director. We were the only female editor to editing team out of an entire building. You know, I can go to floors in big facility houses and look through the door, and it's male. Or I can walk in and they're setting up the Avid. And, you know, I'm a bit old, so probably I don't look like a young, whippy editor. And they'll say, oh, I'll give you the settings when the editor arrives. And it's like, I'm the editor. Do you know what I mean? That's still happening.
That's really quite shocking in 2019. Matt, have you noticed a shift? Does it still feel a very male-dominated, particularly in drama, actually, more male?
I know a lot of female editors, but yeah, I think there was definitely an imbalance still, massively. So there seems to be a lot of female assistants now as well. But
which is brilliant.
But yeah, which hopefully bodes well for the future. But yeah, I think there's definitely a work to be done still.
Yeah. So, and was there another question somewhere else? Did I see a hand up? No. Okay, we'll move on for now then. So one of the things that I wanted to talk about, you mentioned that sort of 7 to 10 weeks would be the average for editing something like an episode of All Woman. You know, that's quite a lot of time, really, but once you're in there, it doesn't seem like much. What about in drama? What are the time frames? How long is it? I mean, working with Shane, is it a different length of time?
Yes, it's a very different process with Shane because there's so much improv and a lot of it is found in the edit. The editing process takes much longer. I mean, I think we had about 18 months for This Is England and probably a bit more than that, actually, for The Virtues. So, I mean, yeah, it's a long process.
So it's sort of structured completely differently.
That includes all the post and online stuff as well, but yeah, it's a different way. It's probably a more documentary type edit, I suppose, in some ways.
And can you just give us a bit of an insight into how you organise material? You know, how long you spend actually viewing? You know, what's when you start an edit? How do you get going?
So the assistant will sync everything up. So you sort of each day you're presented with the previous day's shoot in bins and folders, and then I'll watch it all. I go through scene by scene rather than watching the rushes in one go. But I'll watch everything and then start sort of just chopping away at it. And like I say, you'll find bits to build out of. But I mean, with Shane, sometimes he shoots on 5 cameras, and you can have 12 hours rushes a day sometimes to get through. So it's quite a...
So just viewing is a full-time job?
Just viewing it is quite... I mean, you can group them up so you can view them at the same time, but it's a fair old job getting through the assembling process. But it's essential, I think, you see it, because that's when you do sort of get to really... I think it's important to really get to know the footage properly and sort of know it inside out, really, so then you can sort of... When you do have problems, you know where to go to sort of find things and you know all the bits that can save your life sort of later on.
It seems to me that it's a great qualification for becoming a director yourself, really. Has that ever appealed to you?
Yes, I mean, I'd love to, but it's a very different set of skills, I think. Editing is very much sort of responding to things and...
But you also absolutely understand how things have to go together and work.
Yes, I suppose so. But I don't know, it's quite different in a way. It's sort of looking at something and criticising it and understanding what's wrong with it and how to fix that is kind of different, I think, to sort of making it in the first place somehow. It's sort of quite a different skill set, probably. And yet, a lot of editors have gone on to become very good directors. I mean,
Yes.
it's
not the most usual path, is it, though?
Not these days. I think in the past, in film, there were a lot more sort of editors. Certainly in TV, I don't know many that have done it.
How about you, Emma? Does it appeal to you?
No, I actually I don't know. I think I'm quite a shy person. So I think most of the editors I know are quite shy, and I actually quite love the intimacy of cutting room. It's quite a protective space. I always think that, when your director comes in, you've watched their rushes and they're walking and going, God, what do you think? And you're sitting there thinking, what do you think of what I've done with your rushes? And you slowly introduce people, like your series producer and exec. It's quite a safe environment. I think it's quite a safe environment.
It should be quite stress-free, I think, shouldn't it?
It should be.
Because the set's so hectic.
And you should have a good, and also exactly because the director's been out filming 24/7, or they're still out and they come back and they're going out filming again, and it should be a place where they can come in and just take a beat. And that's not to say you can't have robust conversations in the edit and you can't defend your opinion, all those sorts of things. But it shouldn't be animosity, and you should laugh. My giddy aunt. I mean, I swear, I feel sorry for sometimes people next door to me because you have a good giggle. You have, no matter what the subject matter is, you do, don't you? You have a damn good giggle.
It's such good fun, yeah.
That makes the long days shorter.
Exactly, and also when you're dealing with difficult subject matter, I think you sort of have to, find some lightness in there as well.
Yes, I'm sure you do. Any other questions before we move on? Okay, and I'm going to move on to your next clip that you've chosen, Matt, because it's a departure really from the sort of social realism in a way. It's a ghostly story, The Dead Room, which was directed by Mark Gatiss or Gattis. I never know how to pronounce it. Gatiss, BBC 4.
That's right. He wrote and directed this, and it's a very tightly scripted sort of ghost story. But it's
quite the reverse.
Quite the opposite of how Shane works, but also time-wise, I think this was a 3-day shoot and a 10-day edit. So it was a very quick turnaround sort of thing, which shows you. There's no sort of hard and fast rules in terms of timings, I don't think.
So it was a smaller budget, in other words?
Much smaller budget, yeah. It was a BBC 4 sort of Christmas ghost story, but he's a really great writer, and he deconstructs the sort of how you tell, in an earlier scene, deconstructs how you tell a ghost story. It's all about sort of holding back everything, waiting, and not really revealing anything till the end, and that kind of very much informed the editing, I think.
Okay, well let's have a quick look at it. So just by way of setting it up, Aubrey Judd, veteran radio presenter of The Dead Room, soon realises that elements of his own past are not as dead and buried as he perhaps hoped. Simon Callow stars, and this is a ghostly story.
Ready Player Death was written by Tom Wallace, produced by Tara Lohia, and narrated by Aubrey Judd. The Dead Room is a Black Door production for ZZ Media. See you next time. Pleasant dreams.
Thank you, Aubrey. That was great.
Still got it?
Still got it.
You say all the right things. Fancy the Warwick? I could use a drink. Been a long day.
Might have to take a rain check.
Okay, no problem.
How about Friday?
No can do, I'm afraid. Got a telly. Dementia Man 2.
A sequel?
That's the character's name. There's a Dementia Man 1 on the call sheet as well. Get offered rather a lot of those kind of parts nowadays.
Sorry I can't come. I'm doing a talking book tomorrow. I need to do a little bit of prep. Lots of difficult names. Turkish, I think.
Dennis Howell. Mr. Dennis Howell, up till now Minister for Sport, has been appointed Minister for Drought by the Prime Minister, Mr. Callaghan. With the temperature still hitting 30 degrees centigrade, a whopping 89 degrees Fahrenheit, there's no let-up in sight. Mustn't grumble, eh, John?
Thanks, David. Never happy, are we? Too hot, too cold. What are we like? Anyway, here's Fox with Single Bed.
The summer had to end, didn't it? Everything has to end.
Come inside. Oh, I've been accepted. You had your night shoes. Shake them off.
tell us a bit more about the story.
So he's an old he's an old actor. Basically, he's killed a lad, sort of essentially, who was going to expose him for being gay in the 70s, and he's sort of telling this story now in a radio studio, and
so he's haunted by his own.
He's haunted by the memory of it, and
And obviously a really famous actor, so even with a low budget, a great actor can,
Yeah, I mean, it's the same with The Virtues. I mean, the scene from the previous scene was shot on a DSLR camera, single camera, but it was just having someone great in front of the lens is, you can do amazing things, and same here. I mean, he's such a great actor that I think it's basically the show is set in sort of 2 rooms, but you can sort of do a lot to sort of tell a story in that space, I think, with imagination and good writing.
And was there a lot of debate with Mark over how you portrayed the ghost, how you represented those ghostly scenes?
I think not so much. No, I mean, I did a fairly tight assembly on this one, from what I remember, and which went down quite well. And then it was just sort of teasing out the haunting moments to make them
and the audio is
the most
really
effective.
Important.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that I tend to work on quite a lot in the edit, because it's so important to the way the sort of cut works. And then that gets taken by the sound guys, and they use bits of that and elaborate on it and do other stuff. But it's it's essential to the sort of.
And how did you enjoy the process of cutting that compared to, say, the Shane Meadows experience?
Great. I mean, again, Mark's a really great, fun person to work with, so it's it's a really fun job, just on that level. But it's a different set of problems with the scripts, because you're slightly kind of tied into the structure there more, so you can't do so much to through that. But you can sort of nipping out lines here and there and just sort of tweaking things can make an enormous difference to the sort of flow of the story and the way things work. So it's a very interesting process.
What do you do if you've got really bad actors?
Play it on the back of their heads so you can't see them talking. Try and see it as far away as possible. As little.
Right. So if we see a lot of over-the-shoulder shots, we'll know it's not.
No, I mean, that's not true. Occasionally you get a scene that's not as, doesn't work as well as others do. And it's usually, I don't know. It's not usually bad actors actually. It's usually just something that doesn't quite land on the day, or there's just something not quite working there. And but there's always ways around it. Like I say, I mean, seeing other people, what we're playing off. But now I'm really paranoid that there's something that
You probably know where a lot of the bodies are buried, though, in all these careers. Emma, what about working with presenters in different ways? Because I'm assuming that some presenters probably have to do 50 takes, and some are better than others, aren't they?
They are. I think that's very frustrating. Not frustrating, but that then means that it's a very long time in the edit trying to go through and find those best takes. And I mean, it's been a while. I wouldn't say that Louis is a presenter in that sense, because it's more organic. He's more part of it. And Kathy was good on her pieces to camera. She delivered brilliantly. I've recently had somebody who couldn't, and actually we ended up not broadcasting most of those. They won't go out. And it also, because by the time I get the rushes, if they're not standing up, there's nothing you can do with them. You then have to think outside the box. So it'll be a piece to camera, or not a piece to camera, it'll be a line of commentary or something like that. But you talking about scenes that don't work, the hardest rushes to work with are the rushes that are just like that. And sometimes for no fault of the director, because you are shooting observation, and life can be like that. But if I've got weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, hours and hours and hours of rushes that are just doing this, and you have to make a film out of it. You have to start thinking differently how you can make it step up, and then it does come down to cutting hard against things, laying voice under in a different way, and that's what I mean. If you then have the 360 of watching all your rushes, then a piece of sync here, you can move it here, as long as you're not taking something out of context. That's the main thing, that by sliding a piece of sync up here, they'd still be thinking the same thing, then that's fair. I mean, in Louis, I did the same thing. The final scene of the Exit Network group, there's a final piece of sync that he ends where he says, who he's going to miss, who really cares, he misses an old person if they die. That's taken from the first scene he met, where Louis met him. But the reason I felt okay putting it there is that man's mindset would not have changed between that first meeting and the second. If I'd had interview that made me realise it had changed, there's no way I would put that at that point in the film.
And you're not obviously saying, you know, this was what he said after so-and-so died.
No,
it's about representing.
Yeah,
it's
you're
how you
representing
represent.
his viewpoint on something. His viewpoint had not changed. What I wasn't saying is he said it after that. He literally, that is his mindset. That's why he does what he does. That's what his mindset is. So in the edit, especially in documentary, you have to be really careful because these are real people. Where you place that sync and how you place that sync.
And there is a whole kind of ethical dimension here, and it is incredibly important not to. Well, it's the difference between distilling and distorting, isn't it? Not to misrepresent a scene. You can take something and use it impressionistically, but you can't use it in really sort of, as it were, pretending it's something it's not.
Exactly. And that's the other reason why if you're watching all your rushes means that you know what's there. So that you're not just jumping to day 3 being told, oh, actually, that's fine, because you know up to there, you just know the 360 as much as you ever can as an editor because you're only given the rushes. But I just feel like in the edit suite, I will ask so many questions, you know, that are not relevant. Some of my directors are like, why are you asking that? I just want to get a 360 on these people because they're about to go in front of the nation or whoever. So, and also I'm quite nosy as editors. We're quite nosy, but yeah, just to get the 360, so you're telling your story, their story fairly, I suppose.
And of course, in drama, you can do what you want, can't you? You can put anything anywhere if it's going to work. Within reason.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I've just done one recently that's based on a true story, so I suppose there's a moral sort of element to that you have to be quite careful with. But yeah, generally, if it's the director's or writer's written it, you can sort of do what you want, can't you? And as long as it works, it's finding the sort of the truth within the sort of the material somehow, the sort of emotional truth of it that sort of that then makes it really sort of powerful.
Very different kind of creativity between factual and drama. Any questions before we go to the last clip that we're going to show? Yes, one here. Oh, one here and then here. Thank you.
So, like I said, editing is really powerful. You can change a story from one drawing to another if you wanted to. So, how do you keep that balance between what the director and the writer wanted and what you're seeing in your own creative vision?
Do you want to answer?
It's a hard one to answer that, isn't it? 'Cause it's just a process. You kind of work through it and bounce ideas for each other. Really, it's kind of. I mean, you sort of bring your own thoughts to it, and then just sort of see what the director says, and then you try things and throw things around. I mean, one of the things that's really helpful later on as well is screening things, like showing it to people that haven't seen it before. I think is always an incredibly eye-opening experience, and you can really sort of get a sense where things are dipping or where there's problems with a cut there.
At the end of the day, it's the director's, the director has the last word.
Yeah, usually. I mean, yeah, absolutely. And that's right, because they're the ones that have sort of guided it from.
But then they've chosen you because of your creative abilities. So, it has to be a conversation.
That's it, and you have to have an affinity with them, their sort of material and their way of working.
So finding a person you can work well with is crucial.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think you can building a relationship, like working again with people is really useful, isn't it? You get a shorthand then and can sort of understand each other quite well.
Yeah,
I always find it quite nerve-wracking when I start with a new director because there's always a slight awkwardness for the first few days where you're just sort of walking and stepping around each other a bit. And
I always describe your first viewing, this is really not right, but I always describe my first viewing with a channel as literally standing, I know this is a completely wrong thing to say, but standing and pulling your pants down because it's just so revealing, and I've been doing this nearly 30 years and they're not ogres. And I know some of them now, but it's just and it's not for you, it's just you want especially you want your director, you want it to work for your director. You know what I mean? That's what it's about. It's like...
I find showing assemblies to directors quite harrowing as
well.
Yeah,
exactly. When you don't know them, you're like, do you not like that?
Because you deliberately leave mistakes in and problems there to so you can work around them. So it's quite a it's a horrible experience. And they're always really long and baggy.
We're sitting here saying it's a horrible experience. Actually,
that's great.
Really
it's really, it's the start of a really interesting process.
Here. Where's the microphone? Oh, have you got it?
Hello. Oh, okay. I just wanted to ask, so when you're dealing with narratives that do have a real life kind of background to it, how do you find editing things, especially when it's dealing with obviously you're dealing with the real life stuff with Louis, and sometimes in the dramas there are some real life stories you deal with. How do you find dealing with those stories and making sure they're authentic throughout?
It's a good point because, of course, family members and, people on whom factual dramas are based, they're real people. There's impact for real people, isn't there? I mean, just briefly, Emma.
I think, you make sure... I mean, my rule is do as you would be done by, and also that the fact of the matter is that the people that go in front of the camera are far braver than I would ever be. They're far braver than I would ever be, and there's, you know, that doesn't go for politicians. You know, they know what they're doing. They'll if you can get through a crack of a politician, I think they're fair game. But Joe Public don't quite know, and I don't mean that rudely to them, but the power that we have in the cutting room and what you can do. So you just do your best in your decency by them. On the whole, most of the things I cut are watched by the contributors. So the whole of the Choosing Death, they watched them and they were very happy. In fact, Gus's family showed it at a memorial for him. So that Naomi came in on the Acid film and she watched her film, and so they've all watched their films that I know of, and if they they've been happy.
Well, that's actually a very good. It's a very good moment to show the next story, which is very much people, revealing all the sort of most challenging things in their lives. This is our final clip, Brain Hospital, which was BBC One over a decade ago now.
Channel 5.
Channel 5.
It's not
Sorry.
the BBC one.
Channel 5.
Sorry, love, yeah.
And it was a documentary series set in Britain's leading brain hospital, the National Hospital for Neurology. Thank you.
It's the morning of Martin's operation.
I mean, they've got to go in there at some point. So, get in there. I think it was just more. There was more of it than I imagined. There's 4 or 5 big ones and 4 or 5 small ones. So it's a lot.
Before he operates, neurosurgeon Andrew Broadbelt takes a final look at Martin's latest brain scans.
So I counted 19 last time. Let's just see. 20, 21, so I count more each time. I'm surprised how well he is with the amount of tumour in his head. You know, just now we've counted more than 20 lesions there, and he's functioning amazingly well with that. If we do nothing, we're looking weeks, maybe a few months. I can't see longer than that with the amount of tumour there.
I think he sees it more as a nuisance, like, push it back a bit, that's what he thinks. I think that's what in the back of his mind, it's just not the right timing. Because he had a plan, didn't he? He has a plan to do this, plan with Nick and me and Eddie, and he wanted to finish all them plans and then he can be ill. That's his mindset usually. Good dad. Stubborn, determined. On the right side of feared and loved at exactly the same time. That's why I describe him. As he said, as long as he can have a good rant, he wants to be around. So he said as soon as he goes inarticulate and can't beat someone in an argument, he thinks that's, he'll call it a day. Which I think's fair enough.
So that's a family choosing to tell a heartbreaking story. And you, I think, very interestingly chose to put that as the son's thought track over the operation. That was a very deliberate choice.
Yeah, it was actually, because that's they're playing against, there's 2 stories running there. There's Martin and Gaynor, that's Martin there, and there was Mark and Julie. Mark was undergoing an op where he was fully awake, and so it was a very clinical, but this, I'm going to sound very cutting, but kind of very clean about this, but it was a very clinical, you had to be talked through that process. Whereas Martin's, for me, it's an not that Mark's isn't, but it's an emotive thing. And so by placing his son, you know, it is his brain, it's his mind, it's him, as he said himself. And it loads the scene for me with emotion, but also the responsibility of the surgeon. You kind of, with that amazing shot that Claire got where she pans up, she pans down again, it loads the whole scene. But what it also did when you watch the film through is Gaynor was very able to express her emotions with Martin, and Julie wasn't. She was on a different crisis point of her life. And by playing them together, they feed off. When you play different people together, they can fill the gaps. And that's not second-guessing how Julie's relationship with Mark. I know I'm talking, you didn't see them. But I do believe that, this was filmed, people at crisis point in their lives. I don't know how I'd react. I don't know if I'd tick a box of emotion in that point. And I do think Julie cared deeply about Mark, and by playing those two characters together, I believe that Gaynor was able to express the love that Julie couldn't for Mark. I'm talking abstractly, but it's a conversation I had with Peter about about the film, but yes.
No, really, really powerful. We're out of time, but are there any final questions? Just one final question from anybody? Yes, there's one question just there. And there's very quickly, if you can answer very quickly, because we don't want to, everyone wants to move on, I'm sure.
Hi, so I've really enjoyed seeing the editing that you guys have done, excellent editing. But in your opinion, what makes a bad edit and what are the biggest misconceptions about editing?
That's an hour-long conversation. in a word. What would you say, Matt?
Oh, goodness, that's a hard one.
Is it when it's too literal?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, or sometimes it can just be what I call a dirty edit. Sometimes I'll whip out all the sound, because sound will forget. Sound's really important. If you have a dirty audio edit, it's horrendous. You have to sound's key in documentary. So if you can get yourself, make sure you do good sound, because you can't save it. I can save visually. Visually, you can save things through grading, but sound you can't get back. But also, I sometimes just whip out all the sound, just watch the vision go through. Because if it goes through smoothly without sound, they're clean edits. And, sometimes you can get a blink on the edge of something.
There's technical things like that.
But I'd say also bad edit is just even your gut. It feels like you've done something wrong, especially if it's with a contributor. Don't do it. I've been asked to do things in the cutting room, and I've gone, I'm not doing that. If that was my mother, if that was your mother, I'm not doing that. I'm not the editor for you. I've done it. There's a moral, especially in the world we're living in now. There's a moral line in documentaries to hold true to the people that are brave enough to go in front of the camera. Because we're to me, we're not there. I would say in documentaries we're telling brave people's stories. So if it feels like you're doing something that's morally wrong, don't do it. If it's going to hurt the person, I suppose.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I think that's a very good point. And then just final question here. Thank you.
Yeah. So, do you use your own editing software if you're requested to edit something, or is the studio and the editing software always there? And if it is a different software than you're used to, how hard is it to get used to it when you put it on a job?
Wow.
Briefly, Matt, how do you work?
I always use Avid if I can, because it's just the.
You don't have your own kit.
I have got my own kit, but I tend to be in facilities and stuff because they tend to do deals for the whole post process, and so. And actually, with Shane's stuff, we just rented a house and set up 2 edit suites in a house in Nottingham and edited there, which was a great way of working. But
so you have to be flexible, in other words.
You do have to be flexible. I mean, I would be quite resistant to trying. I used to use Final Cut 7 a bit. That was pretty good. But yeah, no, Avid's mine.
Yeah, I always use Avid. We've got an Avid
choice.
at home, an edit suite at home as well. I remember using Final Cut when I beta tested it. It was just, and I've never gone back. It nearly broke me.
But you're married to another editor, so having an edit suite at home makes sense.
Home,
But fundamentally, it shouldn't matter because it's the same skill, whatever you use, isn't it? It's whichever software you know.
As long as you can get your head. But I think to ask yourself to jump between different software, as well as taking on an edit, if you know the software and you're comfortable with it and you can have that software, then use it. But exactly that, it's a tool. All the software is, whatever you're using is a tool. If you've got the ability to be creative, whatever you're using, you're the next generation. You're going to cut in a way that we don't even know about yet. If you become editors, that's the truth of it. Do you know what I mean?
There's a lot of new stuff coming out.
The way you're cutting at home in your bedrooms is just a way that we would never have done it. So, you are the next ones, I suppose.
Well, let's hope there is a next generation of editors sitting in this room, and that seems like a good place to finish. So we have come to the end of the session. So it just remains for me to say thank you so much to Matthew Gray and Emma Lysaght.